Good evening and welcome to a very special Dollars and Cents Tonight discussion. My name is Timothy and I'm joined with three other colleagues of mine today to discuss a very important topic, the Singapore Budget 2021. Okay, so let's just get down to it. One of the biggest news from the budget, at least for me, is that the Singapore government is going to draw down another 11 billion from our reserve. 9.3 billion of it were actually money that was set aside to be used in 2020 but was not yet deployed. Dinesh, I'm just going to ask you on that, are you surprised by that?
Not very surprised that we're running into another deficit, right? Because we are still on the back of the COVID-19 year. Additional support still needs to be put into the system, but maybe in a more calibrated way. And running a much lower deficit definitely shows that the government is putting our money where it feels most necessary.
The DPM said that 11 billion was going to be drawn from the reserve this year and coincide nicely with how much he's also setting aside for the COVID-19 resilient package, which is 11 billion, right? And I just mentioned it goes into three areas: public safety and safe reopening. That includes your vaccination, contact tracing, extension of the job support scheme. I think that's an interesting one there, as well as targeted support for specific industries like aviation, the arts and culture, as well as COVID-19 driver reliefs.
I mean, when you look at it just as a standalone, right, what we're doing for the COVID-19 resilience package, it does feel like it's a lot less than last year. Probably rightly so, because we have spent a lot on it. We have overcome it. Many sectors have overcome it to a certain degree. And on another note, we have to see that they're extending some schemes, the JSS and JGI. But they're not extending other schemes, right? I think some that come to mind is maybe the COVID-19 support grant. Some of us got a few $100s last year. And then they also have that. They also paid out the SIRS. So it didn't matter.
Scheme, yep.
Yeah. It didn't matter like which industry the self-employed is in, right? And if you're eligible, you can just apply for it. So they're not continuing with those grants or those schemes. It's quite glaring, right? It shows that the government is moving on from just a blanket paying or pay off to come out of COVID-19. We are out of it and they're not going to spray the money on a blanket basis.
Yeah, so for those kind of schemes, if you realize, right, there is a different threshold for the schemes that they are extending and the schemes that they are not, right? So for the support grants, a lot of them are calibrated now. Like the COVID-19 support grant is now COVID-19 recovery grant, which has a higher threshold, which is a bit more difficult and actually incentivize people to search more thoroughly for employment. And in a way, it's like forcing people to not just sit and wait for a handout from the government, but to really push themselves to find something that it's find employment in another sector.
Does anyone here actually think that the government might have done too much in 2020?
I do feel that the government did pour a lot of money last year in anticipation of a much worse effect that did not happen. Because in a way, Singapore did recover quite fast from the pandemic, right? Our first wave was pretty much contained within this after circuit breaker. We managed to lower all our cases, community cases. And in a way, the economic impact was softened because we didn't have to go into a second round of lockdown, which is what is happening with other economies, right? And I think when they planned the budget, they did plan for a worst case scenario where there could be multiple shutdowns or maybe not a full lockdown, but a second partial lockdown. And this, in a way, when it didn't happen, they ended up with more money, also called excess money that could be not used last year.
You are right, Angela, because when I look at the FY 2021 analysis which MOF just put out, what I noticed is that MOF actually estimated for FY 2020 revenue to be 76 billion. Naturally, it fell short of that because at that point in time when it was projected, COVID wasn't really something which happened yet. And but in the end, FY 2020 actual revenue was 64 billion, so that's about $12 billion less than expected. But what's interesting to note, and I think that's something Singaporeans ought to know, is that when it comes to FY 2021, in spite of knowing that COVID-19 is still around, the government is actually projecting a revenue of 76 billion. So that's similar to what they were projecting before anyone even knew COVID was happening, and more, about $2 billion more than FY 2019. So I think it's fair to say that the government is quite confident, at least on the economic side of things, to be able to achieve the kind of revenue that they set out to, basically get, in 2020, in spite of knowing that COVID-19 is still around us.
No, I think you hit the nail, right? The revenue is back to where they estimated last year. Yeah, but going back to whether we've been too generous or the government has been too generous with its payouts, right? I think we have seen some higher profile financial results coming out about this time, right? Where companies announce their results, where, I think one of them was Challenger Technologies. Another one was maybe Comfort, where the results wasn't that great, but I mean, it still pulled through and showed like a profit at the end of the year. So some may argue, that might be overkill there. You're giving out too much. These companies profited from it. But at the same time, you don't want to be left in a scenario where, some of your biggest companies like ComfortDelGro, they're facing huge losses, they have to downscale rather than look towards the future where maybe they have to spend on another thing the government mentioned, going to green electric cars. You want these companies to think forward as well.
I just want to touch a little bit on our Telegram poll. So we actually asked our Telegram users about which part of the budget they were most excited about, and not so surprisingly, 33% says that it's the GST voucher that caught their attention. But I think interestingly, for me at least, is that 15% of our respondents actually say that what got them interested is electric vehicles related initiative. So Joe, I know you're a big fan of electric vehicle and green energy. So, I'm surprised that, so many Singaporeans are ranking it as top of their priority. Are you surprised?
Basically the government has been listening to what the people have to say, right? So like in the most recent IPS survey, basically there was a poll. They realized that 3 out of 5 Singaporeans are actually prioritize economics, environmental sustainability above economic growth. And 9 out of 10 millennials, which is like young people, the younger generation, actually wants the government to do more in the area of environmental and sustainability. And yeah, basically the government is trying to tell people that they hear that.
Okay, I agree with you. I'm all for green energy, and I'm a huge fan of Tesla for many years already. But my question really is, and Minister Heng really focused a huge part of his speech on talking about green energy, electric vehicles. I think there was also a conversation about the government issuing green bonds to actually fund some of these initiatives. Is this really the right time?
I guess it might be a bit controversial for me to say that, I felt like he did spend a bit too much time on it, given that we are actually still in the midst of fighting COVID-19, right? But at the same time, I do agree with Joe. Green is the future. We can't totally ignore it. So some time had to be spent on it.
Yeah, but as in they spent more time, but they didn't exactly spend a lot of money. They spent like only 30 million, and they say it's expected to be spent across 5 years. In a way, I guess the government is trying to show the people that they are doing their best, that they are trying to, but yet still take it from a very prudent perspective, whereby the amount isn't exactly like in the hundreds of millions.
Angela, do you think there's anything else that caught your attention?
If you look closely at the budget, a lot of the COVID-19 related schemes and policies are all extension of duration actually. It's not even an expansion in the amount or the qualifying criteria. It seems like the government is like trying to close off the support they have been giving for COVID-19, and possibly it's in anticipation of recovery.
We've come to the end of this discussion. I hope you guys watching it, you guys are getting some good insights. Let us know what you think. We'd be glad to hear your comments, and if we see something we like, we might even investigate more a little bit about it, write about it, maybe discuss about it again, and continue to stay safe. Bye-bye.